Ambassador Daalder, how important do you think looking at the wording of Article 5 will be in the drawing up of the new strategic concept?
I think it's very important to understand what Article 5 says. We're not here in an exercise of changing any of the wording of the treaty. The treaty, all 14 articles, 23 sentences, is a remarkable document of remarkable clarity. The question that I think we all face is, what do these words that were written 60 years ago mean in the very different world that we live today? And one of the questions we're going to ask is, what does it mean to defend against an armed attack, to regard an armed attack of one as an armed attack against all? One thing it means is what it has always meant, is that one of us is attacked, we all come to the aid of that member, as indeed happened for the first and only time on September 12, 2001, when the United States was attacked by terrorists. A very different environment, a very different kind of scenario than we had envisaged when the treaty was drafted and signed in 1949. So that's the question, not how we should change the wording, but what do these wording mean in the 21st century.
How difficult will it be to balance the current day threats, for example in Afghanistan, with the potential longer term threats, for example climate change and energy shortages?
Well, I think we have to be clear about what NATO is for and what it's not for. What it is for in terms of Article 5 is to defend against and prevent an armed attack against our member states. NATO also has, under Article 4, a very important provision which says that the member states who feel threatened in any way for their security, their territory, their populations, can come to NATO for consultations. And I think one of the things we would like to see happen in NATO is that this becomes a body that once again becomes the place in which the member states take their concerns for international security, start discussing them, consult about how to act, and perhaps even forge joint actions. But not everything has to fall under Article 5. Indeed, the things what Article 5 are for are those unique threats related to the use of military force, armed attack it says, and that all the other threats, which may be large, in fact growing, even big, and larger still than the threat of arms attack, are issues that we can deal with and discuss around the table at 28 as a way to figure out how do we deal with them collectively. Is there a way in which we can work together in order to deal with those threats?
At the end of the strategic concept, do you think Russia will be portrayed more as a partner or as a threat?
Well, we have long agreed that Russia is not a threat. We signed the 1997 Founding Act, which says that we do not regard each other as adversaries. So I don't think the strategic concept is going to look at who threatens us in terms of countries. I think what the strategic concept is going to look at is what's the international environment in which the alliance operates today? What are the challenges that confront the member states? And how are the member states best positioned to deal with those challenges in a broad and forward-looking way, to once again give not only the member states, but particularly the parliaments and the people of the member states a clear understanding what this alliance is for. Back when I grew up and I woke up and someone said NATO, I know what we were talking about. We were talking about the defense against an identifiable threat. We need in the 21st century once again to have a sense of what this NATO is for in a very different and very complicated and more complex environment, but nevertheless it is an organization that is vital to have the 28 nations work together to deal with those challenges.
And you talk about a better understanding of what NATO is. Do you think that that could have an impact on its popularity and, for example, public opinion in terms of the conflict in Afghanistan?
I think it would, in the sense that if people understand the importance of what this alliance is about, and they understand the importance of what we're trying to do in Afghanistan, then there is more likely to be a degree of public support for that effort. There is some uncertainty. It's indeed one of the reasons we're having a close, deliberative attempt to look at what our strategy should be with regard to Afghanistan and how to move forward, in part so we can better explain to our publics why this is important, why we need to continue, why success is important for the security of the NATO countries. The same is true with NATO. I think the exercise of drafting a new strategic concept 10 years after the last time we had done a visionary statement to legitimize NATO in the eyes of the publics is a very important exercise.
The strategic concept requires an outline of requirements and commitments from the allies. This obviously also needs commitments from the budgets, and defence budgets are in the firing line at the moment, a lot are being cut. So is this a difficult time to have a new strategic concept?
You know, it shouldn't, because what an alliance is about is having the collective effort of 28 members to deal with the challenges that we all confront. It is to do more with less. Indeed, one of the reasons why we need to do more within this alliance is that everyone can invest a little so that the collective effort is more. At a time of financial stringency, at a time when defense budgets go down, we should do more in NATO, not less. That is the fundamental purpose of why we have an alliance in the first place.
Do you think this will lead to a reduction in duplication?
It should lead to less duplication. People should invest in multinationally. They should buy capabilities together that alone they can no longer afford, or in fact can never have afforded. Just as we did with the C-17 planes and the AWACS planes, we have in NATO a variety of capabilities that individual nations really could never buy. Now they have them. They are part of it. That's what the alliance is about, doing more with less. That's what value for money really is. That's why defense ministries, rather than looking at ways to find how they can cut their funding and their spending within NATO, should look at how can they maximize their expenditures through NATO.
Do you think this will lead to better cooperation with other international organizations such as the United Nations and the European Union?
I think it's absolutely vital for for NATO to understand and to, in this strategic concept, to clearly lay out that we live in a world where it's no longer possible for one organization, just as it is no longer possible for one country, to deal with the challenges that we face. And that one of the ways we're going to maximize our impact on international affairs is through cooperation with other organizations, be they regional like the European Union or the African Union, or global like the United Nations. That's where the future of this alliance lies, in the partnerships it strikes with other organizations, with other countries, and indeed with other parts of the world.
What do you think about the very public way the strategic concept is being debated? Clearly the end point will be greater unity between the allies, but the process in between, the debating, will highlight more the divisions in the allies, won't it?
Clearly there are differences in the alliance. There are differences within countries. That's what democracies are all about. We talk about them, we debate them, and openly we try to arrive at a new way in which more and more of us can agree. That's what democracy is about. We can't hide our differences. We should expose them. In fact, by exposing them, we may be able to find new ways in which we can work together and move forward. And we can find the value of the things that do unite us, which are far stronger than the issues that divide us. Our common values, our common interest in security, our need to deal with the threats together, because alone we're all going to fail.
Do you think that the strategic concept will include something that looks at the internal processes at NATO, for example, looking at how it makes decisions?
Well, I sure hope so. This organization is in dire need of reform. It is an organization that is basically adopted to a changing world through ad hoc change. When you have 400 committees to run what is in essence one council, you've got a problem. So fundamental reform, re-looking at how this organization does business in a very different world, in which the need for agile and quick decision-making based on quality analysis is very high on the agenda, ought to be part of what we're trying to do. We can't continue to do business as usual. We have to start doing business in a way that promotes the aims and function of this alliance.
And in terms of the threats, as you mentioned before, a lot of them have come from non-state actors, and obviously NATO is an alliance of nation states. So is this the point at which the alliance can say we adapt to this kind of new situation with more asymmetrical threats?
Well, we clearly have to understand that threats are much more diverse than they were when we wrote this treaty in 1949. They come from a wide variety of different places, and we need to have institutions and processes that allow us to deal with those. I think we actually have evolved pretty well in that regard. We identify the threats pretty well. We know how to deal with them effectively and most importantly, by deciding to do it together rather than singularly and apart from each other. That's how we're going to maximize our impact on dealing with these threats. But what we need is a clear look at how does what is happening in the world today affect the security of the member states, and how do the member states together deal with those threats in the most efficient and effective manner.
Is it as important to clarify what NATO doesn't do as what it does do in the next strategic concept?
I don't believe in saying what we don't do. I believe in making very clear what we do do. It is up to the member states in each and every instance to decide whether an action needs to be taken. This is a consensus organization. That won't change. The 28 members will have to agree, and they can do anything that the 28 members can agree to do.
Okay, final question which I'm asking to all interviewees, which is basically if you had to identify a single issue that you thought was fundamental to address in the new strategic concept, what would it be?
How does NATO be an effective actor in a globalized world? We live in a world of globalized threats and globalized challenges and globalized opportunities, and we are a regional alliance within the North Atlantic area. How does that actor, that regional actor, act effectively in a globalized world? That is the challenge we face. It's a challenge that we face as individual countries. It's a challenge that we face in an alliance.
Ambassador Daalder, thanks very much.
My pleasure.